Welcome, Wargamers, to another army review. Today we are going to be looking at the Idoneth Deepkin. We're going to go over all their rules, all their war scrolls, battle formations, heroic traits. There's a lot of really cool stuff. This is an army that I play. I have a lot of fun with it. I love the play style. I think the models are super, super cool. Some of my favorites in all of Age of Sigmar and probably all of Warhammer in general. We are going to go ahead and hop right into this. We're going to look at the battle traits first here. There's a couple of really cool things, a couple of things if you've played against or as Idoneth Deepkin, you kind of know exactly what's going on here. We'll start over here with the Aethersea Voyagers. It's once per battle in the deployment phase. Pick a friendly regiment led by an Idoneth Deepkin hero. No units in that regiment can have already been deployed. Set up those units in reserve, traveling the Aethersea. They have now been deployed. This is a pretty awesome way to keep things off the board that you don't want to get shot at right at the bat. If you don't want to get alpha struck, you can put stuff on to the side. It's also a very good mechanic to get things on to the edge of the boards and get things onto the other side of the board. It kind of combines with this next one. It's the Raiders from the Deep. So it's in your movement phase. Pick a friendly Idoneth Deepkin unit that is traveling the Aethersea to use this ability. Set up that unit on the battlefield wholly within 9 inches of the battlefield edge and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. This is a big mechanic that people have been using in 4th edition, is using these Raiders from the Deep and the Aethersea Voyagers to be able to pull units out off the board and get them to safety and then come back in and hit hard again. We're going to break down a little bit more of this here in a little bit. There's a couple other things we'll talk about with the Raiders of the Deep, but that's essentially what you need to know for these. Biggest thing though with the Idoneth Deepkin is definitely the Tides of Death. A different effect applies to friendly Idoneth Deepkin units each battle round as shown below. For the 5th battle round onwards, repeat the sequence starting with low tide. So battle round 1, low tide. For the rest of the battle round, subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target this unit, and subtract 1 from hit rolls for combat attacks that target this unit if it did not use any charge abilities this turn. This one's really awesome. It just makes your army a little more survivable turn 1. Kind of wards people away from doing an alpha strike or something similar to that coming at you right off the bat. As long as you don't charge, everything is going to be -1 to hit in shooting and -1 to hit with combat attacks as well. So it kind of keeps your army alive there. Battle round 2 is the Flood Tide. For the rest of the battle round, this unit can use a run ability and still use shoot and or charge abilities later in the turn. The Deepkin are a very mobile army in general. You've got the eels that are move 14, you've got sharks that are move 12, the turtles move 10, the eidolons are move 10. So being able to run and shoot and charge for an entire turn makes them pretty mobile. You can get, with a roll of a 6 on a run, on the eels you could be move 20, and then if you rolled double 6s on your charge, it's 32 inches total of movement, so they can just fly across the whole board. Battle round 3 is High Tide. For those of you who've played against Idoneth Deepkin or as Idoneth Deepkin, this is our bread and butter right here. For the rest of the battle round, this unit has Strike First. So everything is strikes first. It's brutal. If things are in combat, you're going first with everything. You're going to kill a ton of stuff. Round 4 is Ebb Tide. For the rest of the battle round, this unit can use a retreat ability and still use shoot and or charge abilities later in this turn. In addition, for the rest of the battle round, no mortal damage is inflicted on this unit by retreat abilities. That's a big one too. I feel like a lot of really good players are able to use this to their advantage. A lot of really good players know when to retreat. And so this one with Deepkin just adds to the mobility where after you fought a whole bunch of stuff, if you have things that are almost dead, right, you can retreat and not take that mortal damage that you would normally take otherwise. And then battle round 5, you're just back to the low tide. And so you're just -1 to hit again. So hopefully with those, you're doing your job early with battle round 2 and battle round 3. You're hitting as hard as you can there with everything. So that way battle round 4, you can kind of disengage, get onto objectives, and get your battle tactics secured. We'll hop over to battle formations now. There's a couple ones of these that I really like, and that a lot of people I've seen have been using these. We'll just go in order here. We'll start with the Namarti Corps. You can re-roll run rolls and charge rolls for friendly Namarti units while they are wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Achillean unit. So this is going to be your thralls, and your reavers are going to be re-rolling runs and charges. That's big. Anytime you can re-roll charges is huge, because there's a lot of times where you fail it and you'll be able to save command points here. The only thing is that not a whole lot of people are running thralls, which is why this one isn't being used so much. I've given thralls tries here and there. I use them more just to kind of hold objectives, because they're cheap and they fight pretty hard, but they're just very squishy, and it's very easy to delete an entire unit of them. And then Achillean units, right, are just essentially your heroes, eels, turtles, sharks, anything like that. So as long as you're wholly within 12 inches of an Achillean unit, you get rerolls, which is pretty awesome. We'll hop over to Achillean Beastmasters right there. Add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made with companion weapons by Achillean units. This is what I'm seeing a ton of, because most companions are hitting on 4s. The eels are hitting on 4s. The turtles are hitting on 4s. Sharks are 4s. And this makes them +1 to hit. So now all of those are hitting on 3s. And that is just super strong, especially considering that with Idoneth Deepkin, a lot of times your companions are hitting harder than the riders themselves. And so getting +1 to hit on those makes them very, very strong. Isharon Council, add 1 to casting rolls, Isharon ritual rolls, and lure light rolls for friendly Isharon units while they are within the combat ranges of any other friendly Isharon units. So this is if you're kind of going more into the magic side of things. Getting +1 to cast is awesome. Anytime you can get +1 to cast, gives you a pretty big advantage. Isharon ritual rolls are the Tidecaster's little ability, and we'll get to him in a second. But you'd be adding 1 to that, and his thing goes off on a 3-up. So essentially, you'd go off on a 2-up now. And then lure light rolls are from the Soul Render, and he can bring back on a D3 on a 2-up. He can bring back that many thralls or reavers or whatever. You just have to keep a couple of these guys next to each other to have those all kind of going off. So there's definitely ways to make that good. It's not one that we're seeing a whole lot of, but I can definitely see the plus on that. The other one we're seeing a whole lot of is the Soul Raid Ambushers. Once per turn, at the end of your turn, pick a friendly Idoneth Deepkin infantry or cavalry unit wholly within 3 inches of a terrain feature. Remove that unit from the battlefield and set it up in reserve, traveling the Ether Sea. So this is a really awesome battle formation. I've been trying to use it. I'm not the best player, obviously, but I've been trying to use this one a little more. It's really hard to move big blocks of units, so if you have 6 Morsar Guard, getting them wholly within 3 of a terrain feature gets a little tricky unless they're, in a forest or something. But, Reavers or 10 Thralls or 3 Ishlaying Guard, really you can do a whole lot with that. And so after you fought, if you think they're going to die, you can pull them out and get them to safety. There's a lot of really cool things with the Ether Sea, and we'll talk more about the Ether Sea in a minute, because there's some War Scroll things that we'll break down as well. All right, moving forward, we're going to hop into the heroic traits. There's really one of these that's getting used a lot more than the others, but we'll break down all of these. The first one is going to be Ancient Pride. The Ancient Pride, if the unmodified hit roll for a combat attack that targets this unit is 1 through 3, the attack fails and the attack sequence ends. This is really awesome. It just means you can only be hit on a 4-up. So things that come into you, all-out attack doesn't matter a lot of the times. It's just a 4, 5, or 6 hits you. 1, 2, or 3 does not hit you. People are putting that onto the Eidolon, combined with one of the artifacts of power, which we'll get to in a second, to just make really, really tanky heroes. The Hunter of Souls. This unit's melee weapons have anti-hero +1 rend, so you can kind of create a hero hunter out of this if you wanted to. Anything that gets you +1 rend, even though it's to a specific unit, is still really good. I just don't think it's as good as Ancient Pride. The Nightmare Legacy, at the end of any turn, pick a visible enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to it this turn by an ability used by this unit to be the target. Subtract D6 from the target unit's control score for the rest of the turn. Control score doesn't, I feel like, come into play super often. You get every once in a while, you'll have to kind of count things up and figure out who has more control score or not. But I think for the most part, it ends up being pretty straightforward who's got more control than someone else. So that's a very situational thing. Ancient Pride is just so good to not take it. The Artifacts of Power, we'll hop into the first one. The Armor of the Sithe. Other than the companion weapon ability, weapon abilities for attacks that target this unit have no effect. That is a little confusing. So weapon abilities, you'll see on War Scrolls are your +1 damage on the charge, anti-infantry +1 rend, stuff like that. Any crit mortals, crit 2 hits, crit auto wound, that stuff wouldn't affect whoever has this. And so a lot of people are pairing Ancient Pride with this so that your Eidolons, or wherever you put it on, are just really hard to hit, and then you can't crit them. So the crit mortals, anything like that, doesn't affect them. So you just make really tanky heroes. Another one of these that I really like is Delicious Morsels. Once per turn in any movement phase, heal D3 each friendly Idoneth Deepkin cavalry unit within this unit's combat range. This one is a little tricky because you have to have whatever hero has to kind of be right in there, close to whatever your damaged unit is. But it's a good way to help keep your eels alive, keep your sharks alive, anything like that. Keep a hero alive as well, because it's each friendly Idoneth Deepkin cavalry unit that can heal itself as well if it's on the Achillean King, or you can heal Volturnos if he's there close, keeping your stuff alive. Another one that I think is really good is the Dritch Leech. Subtract 1 from casting rolls for enemy wizards while they are within 18 inches of this unit. And there's not a whole lot of, as far as I know, there's not a whole lot of things that give a -1 to cast in Age of Sigmar 4th edition. This one is one of them. It's not used a ton because most people are just taking Armor of the Sithé and Ancient Pride to just keep an Eidolon alive and keep him tanky. But I like the Dritch Leech a lot. I think there's a lot of play with it, making something -1 to cast. Because other than like your big named heroes, your big named wizards, not a whole lot of stuff has +1 to cast. So if you're making things -1 to cast, it just makes it that much harder for people to get their magic going. And any army that is very dependent on magic is just going to be able to get magic out anyways. For example, Croak and Nagash are going to be able to just do whatever magic they want for the most part. Looking over to the spell lore, something that I really, really like is the Deepkin spell lore. I think there's a couple of really good spells in here. The first one being Steed of Tides. Pick a friendly Idoneth Deepkin wizard to cast this spell. Pick a visible friendly Idoneth Deepkin unit wholly within 12 of them to be the target. Then make a casting roll of 2d6. Remove the target from the battlefield. Set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from all enemy units. This is the unlimited spell. This means every wizard could cast this every turn, and you can teleport anywhere on the board just outside of 9 of all enemy units. So this is really good to go hop onto objectives that your opponent has left unguarded. This gets you a free take their land for your battle tactics. This can help you get reclaim the realms if you need it. This can help deny battle tactics if your opponent's trying to kill one of your units or one of your heroes and you have a wizard close enough to be able to teleport them out of there. You can really kind of control the board with this, which is awesome. It goes off on a 6, which is really, really low, which means if you're casting it from the Eidolon aspect of the C, you're +1 to cast. You just need 5 on the dice, which is pretty easy to do. You still find ways to fail it though. Casting it on a cast value of 6 is really quite doable. Next spell, Arcane Corrasion. Pick a friendly Idoneth Deepkin wizard to cast this spell. Pick a visible enemy unit within 12 inches of them to be the target. Make the casting roll 2d6. Subtract 1 from the rend characteristic of the target's melee weapons till the start of your next turn. This one, if you're going to get hit hard by something in this turn, you can -1 rend from that, which is pretty awesome. So you throw this into any of these big heroes, big monsters that are typically rend 2, some of them rend 3, drop all their rend down by 1 is huge, and so that can kind of help save your armor. And if you throw it into something that's just rend 1, it just takes it down to rend 0, and then you throw in all at defense, and then you're actually going to be +1 to your armor save, which is pretty awesome. The next one is Pressure of the Deep. Pick a friendly Idoneth Deepkin wizard to cast this spell. Pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches of them to be the target. Make a casting roll of 2d6. Okay, so if it goes off, which needs a 7, roll a dice for each model in the target unit. For each 5 up, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. This is like your horde killer. You see a unit of 20 infantry that all have one health, 1 wound. You roll a whole bunch of 5 ups, try and kill as many of them as you can. If you spike it, you kill like half the unit. Pretty awesome. All right, moving over into the War Scrolls now. We're going to start off here with the Eidolon of Mathland aspect of the Storm. He's got a 3-up armor save. He's got a 5-up ward save. 10-inch movement, 12 health, and 5 control. This is your fighty, killy Eidolon. There's a wizard one as well that we'll get to in a second. But he's got 6 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, rend 2, damage 2, and then he's +1 damage on the charge, which is pretty awesome. His abilities are really cool because he kind of buffs other things around him as well. So the Drench with Hate is add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Idoneth Deepkin units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. So if he's just right up in there fighting with everything else, everything around him is going to be +1 to wound. So you get a couple units of eels in there, you get some thralls in there, you're getting +1 to wound. You're killing a lot of stuff. Pulled into the depths once per turn per army, any charge phase. Pick an enemy hero in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice. On a 3-up, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. This kind of will help you figure out how you're doing your attacks. If you're in a big combat with a whole bunch of stuff, you just make a hero strikes last. You can kind of figure out who you want to go with next, knowing that if it's a big hero that can do a lot of damage, he's going very last after everybody else. So you can kind of figure out where you want to put your attacks. Crashing upon the foe is a really cool ability here. This unit can use charge abilities, even if it used a retreat ability in the same turn. In addition, no mortal damage is inflicted on this unit by retreat abilities. He can get out of combats and hop into new combats. He's very, very mobile. If you get charged in their turn, right, then on your turn you can retreat and charge to get that +1 damage on the charge again. He's much better on the charge because of that +1 damage, but he's definitely okay off the charge, and especially with that strike last to any hero. Moving ahead to the Eidolon of Mathlan aspect of the sea. This is the wizard one. Same profile here, 3-up armor save, 5-up ward save, 10-inch movement, 12 health, 5 control. The big difference is that aspect of the sea is a wizard and a 2-cast wizard, which is pretty awesome. But he's got a ranged attack. It's 12 inches. It's 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, which is big, and then damage D3. So that shooting attack, you can really spike that, and if you hit with everything, wound with everything, it's rend 2, so you can throw this into kind of your more heavily armored units and be able to do a lot of damage there. That D3 damage is a little questionable because sometimes you just get 3 1s, sometimes you get 3 3s. In melee combat, and he's not super great. The Side Trident and the Deep Sea Scepter is 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s. It's 1 rend, damage D3. When you compare him to the aspect of the Storm, he's really not a fighter. He can do damage if you spike there. You got 15 damage you could do with that. Both Eidolons have the same companion attacks. It's 6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, no rend, 1 damage. But he is there to be a wizard. The Dormant Energies ability, he's adding 1 to casting rolls for this unit all the time. It's really good. You can really use that to kind of, with Places of Power, you can get up to +2 on your casts, and then just kind of essentially get off any spell you need. His War Scroll spell is really awesome. The Tsunami of Terror, it goes off on an 8, which is pretty high, but he's +1 to cast, so you're just looking for 7s. If you're on a Place of Power, looking for 6 on the dice. You pick up to 3 different visible units within 12, enemy units within 12. To be the targets, make a casting roll of 2d6. Subtract 1 from save rolls for combat attacks that target those units to the start of your next turn. So picking 3 different units to be -1 to their armor save is huge. You see hammerers, those dwarves that are just so tanky, right? You're playing against Stormcast, 3 units are -1 to their save. Instead of being on a 3-up, they're now to a 4-up save, right? You get your rend in there, it's a 5-up save. You can really do a lot of damage. The only thing with the Tsunami of Terror is that it's only in combat, so your shooting attacks won't matter, unfortunately. Once per turn, per army, any charge phase is Vengeful Waves. If this unit has not charged this turn, pick an enemy unit in combat with it to be the target. Roll a dice. On a 3-up, the target cannot use commands for the rest of the turn. I think it's what Roar used to be in 3rd edition. So you can just make sure, like, if you got something coming in, they can't all out attack you, or if you're attacking first, they can't all out defense. And then Tranquility of the Abyss. Ignore negative modifiers to control scores of friendly Idoneth Deepkin units if they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. I've said it a few times already, and I'm probably going to say it more. The control scores haven't really mattered that much um, up to this point in fourth edition. It's pretty obvious when you control something and when you don't. Okay, next up we've got Volturnos, the High King of the Deep. He's got a 3-up armor save, 12-inch move, 8 health, 2 control score. Um, he hits pretty hard. He's very squishy though. That 3-up save is very deceptive. He doesn't have a ward save, so he can go down pretty quick and pretty easily. He's got 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, Ren 2, damage 2, and then +1 damage on the charge. So he can hit. Once again, he can hit really hard. His mount is pretty awesome. 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, Rend 1, damage 2. So he can hit you pretty hard. He does not take hits very well. He is the Supreme Lord of Tide, so once per battle in any combat phase, pick up to 3 other friendly Idoneth Deepkin units wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. Add 1 to the attack's characteristics of this target's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. You can feel your tides are coming on, right? You're getting into turn 3 where your strikes first with everything. He gets that +1 attack to everybody, right? Your eels are +1 attack. Your thralls are +1 attack. You've got another unit of eels that's +1 attack, and or the Eidolon, right, being +1 attack. You can really get in and do some damage, especially with his passive ability here. Is the first among Achilleans. Add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by other friendly Achillean units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. So your eels are going to be +1 to hit as well, and then you give them +1 attack once per battle. Like, they can really just do a lot of work. You get to turn 3 if you got enough on the board where you're just throwing everything at it. That's where you get so dangerous. And then he has Sealith, the High King's Shield. This unit has a ward of 3-up against mortal damage inflicted by spell abilities, prayer abilities, or abilities used by manifestations. This one is a little tricky. You see that 3-up ward and you think like he's going to be unstoppable. You read that again and it's against mortal damage, and it's only mortal damage inflicted by spells, prayers, or manifestations. It's not as good as it seems, and it doesn't come into play super often. He is super super squishy, unfortunately, and so he goes down very easily. But he hits hard. He hits like a truck. 2s to hit and 3s to wound is pretty solid. If you got the Eidolon of the Storm there, he's going to be +1 to wound. So right, so 2s to hit, 2s to wound is pretty nuts. You're probably getting 4 attacks through at Ren 2. Even things with high armor can't really deal with that super well, and then it's 3 damage for each attack that gets through. So he hits hard. He cannot take any hits. Okay, so next up we've got the Achillean King. He is Volturnos' counterpart. They come in the same box. Very similar profiles here. You got a 3-up armor save, 12-inch movement, 7 health instead of 8 like Volturnos has, but then the control score is also 2. He's a little less good, but he is also noticeably less points compared to Volturnos. He's got 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, Rend 1, damage 2, +1 damage on the charge. That's a little frustrating for being a hero. Being 3s to hit and 4s to wound is not super great, but he does do impact hits. So the Wave Rider is anytime he charges, you pick an enemy unit within 1 inch of it to be the target, roll a d3 on a 2-up, inflict the amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So on a 2-up, you'd be doing 2 or 3 or none at all. And then if you roll that 2-up, you also add 1 to the Rend characteristic of this unit's Achillean royal weapons for attacks that target that enemy unit for the rest of the turn. So he can still get to that Rend 2 damage 3. He's only 5 attacks though, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, instead of Volturnos, who's 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s. Their mount is the same. So you got 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, Rend 1, damage 2. Something about the Achillean King that is cool though is he's the Achillean Paragon. So you pick a friendly non-hero Achillean cavalry unit that has not used a fight ability this turn and is within this unit's combat range to be the target. The target can be picked to use a fight ability immediately after the fight ability used by this unit has been resolved. So he can activate another unit of eels. He can activate a shark immediately after he goes. And so that can kind of help you hit with 2 units before your opponent gets to hit with 1. The Isharon Tidecaster is really cool. I'm a big fan of the Tidecaster. 5-up armor save, 6-inch movement, 5 health, control score 2. Tidecaster's a level 1 wizard, so you get to cast a spell with her. She's got 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, 1 rend damage D3, and then she's got a companion that's 2 attacks, 4s, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, no rend, 1 damage. Very typical foot wizard profile. Her big thing is her ability as the master of the Ether Sea. Make an Isharon ritual roll of D6. On a 3-up, pick one of the following effects to apply until the start of your next turn. The Creeping Mist. Friendly Idoneth Deepkin units cannot be targeted by shooting attacks unless the attacking model is within 12 inches of them. That's really awesome. That helps you avoid cannons and catapults and anything that's got these really long shooting ranges. They can't shoot you unless they're within 12. So it kind of helps you determine like when you're going to be going into them. So you see these heavy shooting armies can't touch you unless they're right up next to you. The next one is the Surging Stream. Add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls for friendly Idoneth Deepkin units. I've paired this one a lot with units coming out of the Ether Sea, right? So you get +1 to runs and charges. Your entire turn 2 tide is you can run and charge and run and shoot and charge. So with the Tidecaster, you get +1 to your runs, you get +1 to your charges. So it just adds on to the overall mobility of the entire army. It makes it very, very good. The Spiteful Riptide. Each time an enemy unit uses a retreat ability, after the effect of that ability has been resolved, inflict D3 mortal damage on that unit. This one doesn't come into play too often because I don't feel like people retreat very often in the game. But essentially, as I understand it, this just means after they've retreated and taken their D3 mortal wounds, they just take D3 additional mortal wounds. Tidecaster is really awesome. Being a one-cast wizard is makes it even more worth taking. This ability is really, really good. It can kind of help you control the board a little easier. And then, yeah, just being a one-cast wizard just is a bonus on top of that. Okay, next up we've got Lotan, the Warden of the Soul Ledgers. Lotan has just got your very typical infantry hero, 5-up armor save, 6-up move or 6-inch move, 5 health, 2 control. He doesn't have any attacks, but his companion does. 8 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1. We're not seeing Lotan used a whole lot in lists right now because he just isn't as good as what he used to do. The Catalog of Souls. Add 3 to the control scores of friendly Idoneth Deepkin units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Once again, control scores don't tend to matter too much. Fount of Willpower. Add 1 to casting rolls for friendly Isharon units while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. So he kind of just throws out a few little buffs to your army, makes your wizards +1 to cast, right? Adds to control scores. I don't think he's bad necessarily. You can just use the same amount of points to do other things with your army. But he might be one of my favorite models in the range. Just the octopus and holding the scroll for him is just. We've got the Isharon Soul Scryer next. Once again, 5-up armor save, 6-inch movement, 5 health, 2 control. The Abyssal Touch is 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, no rend, damage D3, very typical wizard profile. And then he does have a range attack. I never even try and roll this most of the time. It's 10-inch range, 8 attacks. Hitting on 5s and wounding on 5s is just impossible. And then no rend and 1 damage is not enough to make it worth anything. You can shoot in combat, so if something's in combat with him, you can use those as a shooting attack. But I never even roll it, and he's not in combat ever. His big thing, though, is he's kind of like your anchor point for the Ether Sea. So if you've got units that are out traveling in the Ether Sea or whatnot, they can use him to come in as their anchor point using the Finder of Ways. So you pick a Deepkin unit that is traveling in the Ether Sea to be the target, set up the target wholly within 12 inches of this unit and more than 7 inches from all enemy units. So this is a way you can take your stuff that's off the board and put it 7 inches away from enemy units. So like this paired with a Tidecaster, right, where you got +1 to charges, you need a 6 on the dice to be able to charge into units coming off the board. So it kind of just once again adds to the mobility of the Deepkin and the board control that the Deepkin have, because you really control the pace of the game. Good players really control the pace of the game using movement and using the tides to their advantage. Another ability that he's got is the Sci-Far Compass. It's once per turn per army in your hero phase. Pick an enemy hero within 18 inches of this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3-up. Add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Idoneth Deepkin units that target that unit for the rest of the turn. You can just get a +1 to wound onto heroes, which is pretty awesome. He is also a one-cast wizard. You get some magic, you get some unbind, some banishing of manifestations from him, as well as just being that anchor point for the Ether Sea. But he's pretty cheap to be able to do that, and so a lot of people have been using him to go and do that. Okay, moving on to the Isharon Soul Render. He's kind of the weirdest foot hero that the Deep can have. None of his stuff makes any sense to me. He just seems very like out of place for the norm of everything else. He's got a 3-up armor save, which is ridiculous to me for Idoneth Deepkin. For just like a regular foot hero, 3-up armor save, 6-inch move, 5 health, 2 control. The Talon Hook has 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 2. And then the Raker Dart, his little companion, is 3 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, 1 rend, 1 damage. He's got some cool abilities though. One of them I think is hilarious. But Lure Light is at the end of any turn. You can pick up to 3 different friendly Namarti units wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the targets. You cannot pick the same unit to be the target of this ability more than once per turn. Make a Lure Light roll of D3 for each target unit. On a 2-up, return a number of slain models to the target unit equal to the roll. So he can just bring guys back, which I think is a really awesome mechanic. It is just Namarti units, though. So you got your Thralls and your Reavers are the only ones that'll be able to be affected by this. But he can just kind of bring guys back if they're going down. And it's the end of any turn, so your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, kind of a thing. And then this is one of my favorite abilities that I think has ever been made. So it's the Hangman's Knot. So once per battle, in any combat phase, I pick an enemy hero in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll 2d6. If the roll exceeds the target's health characteristic, it is automatically destroyed. It's just funny to me, just like the idea, because he's got the little loop on his little spear thing right there, and he just hooks a guy in it, yanks him, and he's dead. This can come in very handy because you have a lot of little infantry heroes that are 5 health, and so you just have to roll a 6 or higher on 2 dice, which is very doable. I actually used this this ability today in a game that I played this morning against a Slaves to Darkness player who had some Dark Oath heroes in there, and I just ran in there and scooped out his hero, and just that was that. And so he's a very interesting thing. Like, he's not a wizard, right? And he's based 2 damage on his 4 attacks. So he's got some interesting things. If you're using the Isharon Council, you get +1 to roll on the Lure Light ability, which means on a D3, you're pretty much going to be getting back 2 or 3 guys almost every single turn that you do it. You can just bring back a ton of models this way. Moving on to the Achillean Alopex, the Shark. 4-up armor save, 12-inch movement, 8 health, 2 control. You've got 2 options for the ranged attack here. You can do the razor shell harpoon or the net launcher. It's the same profile essentially, 18-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, rend 1, damage 3, which is pretty nice. The harpoon is anti-monster +1 rend, and the net launcher is anti-cavalry +1 rend. So when you're building your list, kind of figure out what you think you're going to see more of. I typically will go anti-cavalry if I'm using sharks, because normally I have a turtle and he's anti-monster with his shots. We'll get to the turtle later though. In combat, the riders have 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1. And then the shark itself has 3 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, rend 2, damage 2, and then it's anti-monster +1 rend. But you can get another attack with the shark because of bloodthirsty predators. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's Alopex's ferocious bite while it is within 6 inches of any damaged enemy units, or while it is within 6 inches of any enemy units that had any models slain in the same turn. This is pretty easy to get. Shoot into a unit, charge that unit, you get +1 attack, most likely. You attack with the riders. If you get 1 wound through with the riders, you get +1 attack with the shark. It's pretty easy to get up to 4 attacks with the shark most of the time. And then if you shot at a monster or a cavalry, you have this really cool ability where you can ensnare them. Pick an enemy monster or cavalry unit that had any damage points allocated to it this turn by this unit's shooting attacks to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3-up until the start of your next turn. Subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a minimum of 1. So essentially, you can shoot something, and then if you roll a 3-up, that thing is charging on 1 die instead of 2. So you can kind of control the board a little bit. If you've got some Varan guards sitting out there, Chaos Knights, you've got any cavalry, you got a big monster sitting out there, you can make a charge on 1 die. Sharks are not getting used as much as they were in the previous edition. I think it's just because the amount of points for a shark is the same as the amount of points for the Ishlane Guard, who I think are a little better. Generally speaking, I do think the sharks have some play. It's hard to justify just taking 1 shark, though. I would take 2 of these if I were you. You can only run them in units of 1 now, which is pretty frustrating. These can be like your take the flanks. These can be running around. They're movement 12, so they're very mobile. A lot of people are just running Ishlane Guard or Morsar Guard instead, which will move us on to the Morsar Guard. These are kind of the more fighty of the 2 eel units. You got a 4-up armor save, 14-inch move, 4 health, control 1. The 1 control is a little frustrating sometimes, but most cavalry units are control 1. And having that 4 health, I feel like whenever I play games and I tell people that each eel is 4 health, they kind of lose their mind a little bit because they think they should be 3 health. So that 4 health is really awesome because it lets you power through a lot of units that have 3 health, other cavalry that have 3 health, and infantry and things like that. But these guys are 2 attacks each with the riders, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1, and then their charge +1 damage and anti-infantry +1 rend. So if these guys get the charge, they're pretty nasty. The eels themselves are 3 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage D3. In addition, if they get the charge, they can use Biovoltaic Blast. If this unit charged this phase, pick an enemy unit within 1 inch to be 1 inch of it to be the target. Then roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in this unit. For each 4 or 5, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. For each 6, inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. Add 1 to each roll if there are more models in the target unit than this unit. If you're running a pack of 6 of these, anytime you charge, you roll 6 dice. Every 4 or 5 is 1 mortal damage, and then every 6 is D3. If you run it into a unit that has any number of models more than you, right? It could be 7 models. 3s and 4s are 1 mortal damage. 5s and 6s are D3. So you on the charge, these guys are pretty nasty. Moving on to the Ishlane Guard, it's the Morsar Guard's counterpart here. They got the same profile, 4-up save, 14-inch movement, 4 health, 1 control. They have 1 more attack than the Morsar Guard, so they're 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1. They're also anti-infantry +1 rend, but they don't get the +1 damage on the charge. But their ability is pretty awesome. The Biovoltaic Barrier. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3-up. Subtract 1 from the attack's characteristic of the unit's target weapons for the rest of the turn. So on a 3-up, you just make something -1 attacks. So if you've got a whole bunch of dudes, these guys can kind of pin them down. Especially if these guys charged because they have Galv shields. This unit has a ward of 5-up if it charged in the same turn. So what you're seeing a lot of is you're seeing packs of 6 Morsar Guard and packs of 3 Ishlane Guard, because these guys can kind of run around and pin different units down while the rest of the Idoneth Deepkin's army kind of catches up to things. But both of these are kind of a staple. The Morsar Guard and the Ishlane Guard are very, very good units, very mobile with that 14-inch movement. and then they got a lot of damage output. The mounts themselves most of the time do more damage than the riders, so that's why people are running Achillean Beastmasters to make the mounts threes to hit instead of fours. It's a very very dangerous unit. Okay, moving on, we've got the Achillean Leviathan, the big turtle. I think the turtle is the best unit that the Idoneth Deep can have. He's got a 3-up armor save, 10-inch movement, 16 health, control score of 5. He's got 2 Razor Shell Harpoon launchers on his back, so it's 18-inch range, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, rend 1, damage 3, and he's anti-monster +1 rend with those shooting attacks. Melee attacks, you've got the crew itself has 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1, but then the big hitter is the turtle itself. 7 attacks, 4s to hit, 2s to wound, rend 2, damage 3, crit mortals. So anytime you roll a 6 when you're hitting, it's 3 damage, 3 mortal damage. He's battle damage when he has 10 or more damage points on him, and it just lowers the attacks from 7 to 5. You can counteract being battle damaged by making him your prized beast as your honor guard, so he would get +1 to hit, and then also cannot be battle damaged. That's what I've seen people running. That's what I run a lot of times. But he also has the Void Drum. Friendly Idoneth Deepkin units have a 5-up ward while they are wholly within 6 inches of this unit. So if you castle around your turtle, you can give everything with wholly within 6 a 5-up ward, which is pretty awesome. And then he does impact hits with his crushing charge once per turn, per army, any charge phase. If this unit charged this phase, pick an enemy infantry unit within 1 inch of it to be the target. Roll a dice, add 1 to the roll. If the target unit has more than 10 models on a 3-up, inflict the amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So you can get 6 mortal wounds there and then just obliterate units with the Leviathan. Giving out that 5-up ward is awesome. He himself has a 5-up ward, so 3-up armor save, 5-up ward. Really hard to kill, really tough, and he hits like an absolute truck. Very, very solid unit. Key to making the Idoneth Deepkin play well. He is a ton of points, so if you're willing to give up about a fourth of your army into this model, he is a great option for that. I almost always take one. I rarely leave the house without him because he's just so good. Moving on to the Achillean Thrallmaster. He's got your typical Idoneth Deepkin foot hero profile, 5-up armor save, 6-inch movement, 5 health, control 2. He's got 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 2. He's got a companion as well, 2 attacks, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. He makes thralls really good. Those are what both of his abilities kind of do here. Okay, so he's got the Achillean fighting stance, which is pick one of the following effects to apply to this unit and any friendly Namarti units wholly within 12 inches of this unit for the rest of the turn. Those units' melee weapons have crit 2 hits, or Way of the Vortex. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target those units. He really buffs thralls. So your thralls, if you have a big block of 20 of them, getting crit 2 hits, can really dish out some damage. I've also seen thralls just sit there and take things because they have the -1 to wound from him as well. Those also go on to those abilities would go to the Achillean Thrallmaster as well. So he has those same things as well. But he can get pretty fighty as well. And then the Thrallmaster, if he has attacked, he can pick a friendly Namarti Thrall's unit that has not used a fight ability this turn and is within this unit's combat range to be the target. The target can be picked to use a fight ability immediately after the fight ability used by this unit has been resolved. So very similar to the Achillean King that we already talked about. He can just activate a unit of Thralls right after he goes. Him and the Thralls aren't a whole lot of points, so you can really have like a pretty strong unit, a pretty durable unit for the most part, that is a very cheap unit and will punch above its weight. Our next unit here is the Namarti Reavers. So this is our first of the Namarti units. These are the little archer guys. They got a 5-up armor save. They move 7 inches, 1 health, and 1 control score. Their Whisper Bows got a 12-inch range. They're 2 attacks each, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1. Crit auto wound is really nice. And then in combat, they're 1 attack, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. Their whole thing with the Reavers is that they can this unit can use shoot abilities even if it has used a run or retreat ability in the same turn. So these guys are really mobile because you're just always going to be running them wherever. The 12-inch range is really short, so you really got to get them in there close, and they can just die very, very easily. They're a solid shooting unit. You don't ever want these guys to get into combat because they will just get obliterated by whatever is touching them. Our other Namarti unit are the Namarti Thralls. 5-up armor save, 6-inch move, 1 health, 1 control. They each have 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, rend 1, damage 1. They are anti-infantry plus 1 rend. So if you're going into infantry, you're going to be rend 2, which is pretty awesome. And then the sweeping blows that they have add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's Lenmari for attacks that target enemy monsters. So if you're going into monsters, you're going to be damage 2. If you're going into infantry, you're going to be rend 2. And so these guys are very cheap. I think they're 100 points per unit. You put the Thrallmaster there with them, you can have a pretty gnarly unit there of thralls that can just like I said earlier, just punch above their weight and do a lot of damage. They're not very tanky, even with that -1 to wound. They can still they've only got a 5-up armor save, so anything that's rend 2 will just go right through. You can run these guys around the turtle to give them the 5-up ward to make them a little tankier, but they're not your most effective use of points, I don't think. I mostly use these guys as my guys to run and hop on objectives, get battle tactics, things like that. But for the most part, they're not going to be a huge focal point of most of your armies. Last but not least, we've got the Gloomtide Shipwreck. This is our faction terrain. There's a lot of questions about faction terrain. I know a lot of people are love-hate with their faction terrain. I really like ours. I think the model's really cool, and I think it helps out a lot. It's got a 4-up armor save. It doesn't move. No control score, right? It's got 7 health. So what you can do is when you're deploying it, you can set up this faction terrain either as 1 terrain feature consisting of both of these, or as 2 of both pieces, or as 2 separate terrain features. So the boat comes in 2 pieces. You can put it together as 1 or separate as 2 different ones. If it's together, it's 14 health. If it's separate, it's 7 health each. What it does is if you're wholly within 6 inches of it, add 1 to save rolls for friendly Idoneth Deepkin infantry and cavalry units, which is pretty awesome. So you can kind of castle up with the turtle, and with this you can kind of protect some of your heroes at the beginning of the game, make sure they're not just getting sniped by anybody. A lot of people have kind of been upset about faction terrain as a way to kind of slingshot off charges and things, because you can charge into faction terrain and then use it to get into other units. You can use it as a battle tactic achiever for do not waver, because you can fight this boat and it can't fight you back. I really like it. I think there's really good ways to use it. You just kind of put it behind. I normally will set it close to objectives as I can, because that wholly within 6 will cover a big chunk of that objective. So I'll put it behind 2 of my home objectives, and then any of my units that are fighting on home objectives are going to be +1 to their armor save because of the boat. But that is my review of the Idoneth Deepkin, looking through their war scrolls, looking through their abilities, looking through faction rules and things like that. I really do like this army. I think there's a lot of really awesome things here. I think they're fun to play. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what armies you guys are running. At some point, I'm going to be making kind of an army builder and some of the things that I'm seeing, some of the things that I'm running and having success with. Kind of build out some Idoneth Deepkin armies and kind of talk about some of the synergies between different units and things. But thanks for watching. Go give a like to this video. Go subscribe to my channel. Hit that notifications button. I'll be making more army reviews. I'll be doing list reviews. Stay posted, because we're going to be getting battle reports here on a separate YouTube channel, and I will link those as we come out with them. Thank you so much.